gets inspired to work harder, and they say that's where they want to be.
Yeah, and actually an interesting little fact about Egypt and sports. There is a sports where Egypt dominates or has been dominating in the past decade, both in male and female events. Do you know what that could be, Tanya?
Ski jump.
Not quite.
Very funny.
Not quite. Ski jumping, as we're being told in the earplug. Actually, it is. We don't really expect that. It is squash. They are really good at squash, and the story goes that there was this diplomat, Egyptian diplomat in Britain in the 1930s who tried squash, played it really well, brought it back to Egypt, and since then there has always been this culture of squash, and nowadays they are the best in the world. So it can happen also for anything, and chess is no exception. We're going to see that in about 50 years.
Until now, Ivory Coast was known, when you said Ivory Coast in sports in one sentence, it was Didier Drogba.
Didier Drogba.
Now
football.
on, it's going to be the Grand Chess Tour as well.
Yeah, for sure. And this game, this amazing game, we're all expecting it. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave against Magnus Carlsen has just started. I'm wondering what's going through Maxime's head at the moment after his loss against Wesley. So in the first round just happened. Does he still believe he has a chance?
I think you always believe in your chance, but that was a tough blow for Maxime. Things couldn't have gone worse in the first round. He knows he really needs to beat this one if he has any chance for first place, but even then, it seems pretty distant. But not only that, we were talking about the Grand Chess Tour points. He wants to finish second in this tournament, even if he isn't able to challenge Magnus Carlsen for first. And right now, he's tied for second. It's not the position he wants to be in. He wants to get that point lead over Hikaru.
And we have a hedgehog opening, and it's actually the one Carlsen chose with white against me in 2015, except that instead of e3, he played d4. But here, white is actually trying to prepare d4 with these moves, e3 and d4, and now it's not the best move to take it, and that's why Carlsen actually plays knight e4, which is a good way to stop white from playing e4 himself later on. An important square, rook fd1. Yeah, it's actually a quite slow opening, but it can all spice up if the games should open later on. They've exchanged on c3, I think, and bishop e4, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Has happened, which again, controlling this important square, and black would certainly like to enhance the control on this square, but also on the long diagonal by putting the queen on b7. We can actually easily imagine exchange of bishops, sorry. If this knight goes away like knight e1 or knight d2, then exchanging bishops on g2 is a possibility. Even then, the black queen should then come to b7 to replace the bishop.
White can also have the idea to avoid this exchange by moving the bishop and going knight g2. But a move like rook ac1, which has been played, is also a very natural move in this position.
Very natural. You know, finish development, your rook certainly belongs somewhere in the center. c1 is a good place to have it. Magnus has
rook e8 on the board,
e8,
because sometimes
sensible.
you want to keep options of e5 open, and that queen on e2
well,
could come under attack.
Yeah, rook e8 is a very flexible. You may want to put a piece on f8 later on, like the bishop, in order to
So we have bishop h3, knight d2 idea on the board.
Okay, bishop h3 was played. As you described, you don't want to exchange
You don't want to
bishops,
trade, because then black's doing fine, and white wants to get in e4 as well.
He wants to at least get some space advantage, something to play for. At the moment, black is so solid. There's no real weaknesses, difficult to make any targets at all. Maxime would love to at least get some space advantage here to play with. e4, even d5 would be nice to play, but unfortunately
He's gone for e4 on the board.
Yeah, e4 is the most natural.
The idea is to expand on the king side and gain more and more space.
And the usual reply is to take on d4, but Magnus is deciding he's going to play bishop f6. He's taking advantage of the tactics. d5 at the moment is unplayable because of the pin on the e file.
And see again, this rook on e8, we were saying maybe to free f8, but not only. As soon as the position opens up, then this rook is placed really well.
He's gone for knight f3. Black needs to be careful about threats like e5. Right now, it's not possible because you probably don't have enough resources defending it.
And b5, the counterattack on the queen side, saying
b5.
you don't have a threat at the moment, Maxime. I'm going to push the queen side, taking advantage of the tactics cb5, ab5. Of course, the opening of the rook on a8 is beneficial for black. It seems things are not exactly going worse for Maxime, but...
No, it's actually, there was this very important point. We had to go over it very quickly because they moved. Alejandro, you said at some point when e4 came in this position, he could have taken on d4, changing completely the shape of the position. But now it's a completely different type of positions we're having. It's not a real hedgehog anymore. And he's gone b4 here.
That will cement that knight that eventually lands on c5.
Yeah, and this a2 pawn is a forever weakness. The bishop has got b7 as well as the a6 diagonal. I think black's doing well here, actually.
Black is doing really well. A sample variation out of my mind is like this knight c5.
He actually decided to take with the pawn.
He has taken with the pawn and not with the knight. Perhaps he was a bit afraid of
maybe queen.
e5
Yeah,
here.
e5.
And
So
the
he
knight
took.
perhaps a little bit weak on that pin.
Although e5, queen c6. Bishop g2.
Yeah, we'll have to go back
Yeah.
to...
No, c5, taking with the pawn also makes sense because this d6 weakness is taken care of. So now that this is sorted, you've got this a2 pawn that you've got a clear attack against. The bishop on b7 is well placed.
I really like Maxime's move, queen e3, because he wants to bring back... Yeah, he's done it. Bishop f1, he wants to bring back the bishop to c4. And, well, then he's going to probably try and occupy this open file. I mean, after all, we have an open file.
Bishop c4, or also knight d2, knight c4 is another plan to get the knight there.
Yeah, this is actually the obvious maneuver, knight d2 and knight c4. It makes
Bishop
sense to
a6
bring
on the board.
But he, I don't know, we'll see what he does.
Yes, I like bishop a6 as well because you want to trade off this bishop and double on the a file.
Well, actually, this position looks about level to me. It's more or less balanced here.
Yeah, the problem with the c5 pawn is pretty much the same as the problem with the a pawn. You can imagine in a lot of cases those pawns will just be swapped. Two weaknesses that it's tough to defend.
Knight cd2, knight f6. The pressure on the c5 pawn has been released, but now he's coming back with the rook to c1.
Almost feels like I moved my knight back and ask, what's the difference between having a rook on c2 and a rook on d1?
Yeah, probably no difference.
Actually, the bishops were traded before rook c1.
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't seem like either side has anything
Knight
tangible at the
d7,
moment.
queen d3, you've got rook a7.
Yeah, the same as with the rooks on
Yes.
c2 and d1. No real tactical threats against the knight. Of course, knight d7 does seem like a little bit of a strange move, putting the knight in the mix of the fire. And this is what I was talking about. Rook a8 played, giving c5 with the tempo, but saying, look, your a2 pawn is just not going to survive.
Well, the thing is, after rook takes c5, for queen b7, hitting e4 as well. So two pawns hanging, a2 and e4.
And he played queen a7 with a similar idea that I'm
A7.
keeping tabs on the rook on c5, which means knight e4 is also a threat, and rook a2 is a threat.
And knight takes e4, yeah, you're right. Knight takes e4 is quite...
So can white go rook c4 here?
c4 is playable, but that does ruin your pawn structure, and
I mean, I
hard
can't
to
allow knight
believe.
e4 anyway, and now I just want to take your b4 pawn. So let's say you trade everything and take on b4 and knight g4.
Yeah, it's a little pawn for white, but black has enough counterplay. Actually, it's not a pawn.
Actually, it's not even a pawn, and
Yeah.
Is gonna
my king's a
fall.
bit weak. So those positions that start to get annoying for white.
Yeah, it's probably still about... Yeah, should be around kind of a
But
draw
black
here,
is definitely
but
doing well here.
Yeah, on the
has
wrong
nothing to
side
fear.
of equality, as we like to say.
Let's get
But we're not yet there.
So let's update our position. Queen a7 on the board, and
He's played rook c2, takes on a6, and he has played rook c8 check. I can see Magnus king going up to h7. Queen trade. Well, this is also very close to equality.
yeah, but now because if you take with the a2 rook, I take a8 and then I go rook c4 and I keep some pressure on the b4 pawn. My structure is doing well.
Knight d2, that's a solid move.
Yes.
Because he could actually try to win this pawn on b4 again, but knight g4
Knight g4
would
is
come
always so much compensation.
and
Looks like a
winning
classical
f2.
game, guys.
So knight d2.
A classical game, but I think it's really interesting that the plans and the quality of play has been quite good. No blunders, no big mistakes, following thematic plans.
Well, for Maxime now, well, frankly speaking, I think that Maxime, after his loss just now against Wesley So, has kind of written off any chance of his to catch up with Magnus. So the question is about second place and getting as many GCT points as possible. So the priority is, exactly as yesterday when he lost against Topalov, the priority is not to keep on losing, to kind of stabilize your inner state and emotions possibly, and a draw is certainly good in this situation for him. But his time,
I was just about to say, he does need to move fast because he's down to 35 seconds on the clock and Magnus has 2 minutes.
Yeah, and Magnus' pieces are slightly more threatening here. The knight on d3, really well placed, although he has to be slightly careful because it doesn't have a square for the moment. It cannot go anywhere without being taken.
Also, sometimes White can plan to play h4, h5 and make things a little difficult on the last rank for the king if Black isn't too careful.
Want to mate Magnus?
Or
do
f5.
you?
It's very ambitious.
Well, I'm a bit concerned about the clock for
Maxime.
Vachier-Lagrave. It's nothing critical yet, but it's almost a minute less than Magnus. But Magnus now has started to think. Well, he feels that this knight on d3 is slightly awkward, perhaps.
Yeah, that was a bit of a strange move. The knight on d3, we've seen this actually a few times this tournament, where you have a very nice and aggressive knight, but it actually doesn't have moves. And it ends up being a weakness rather than a strength in the attack.
Well, there is no threat yet for White, because if rook d2, then there is always c1.
With knight
getting
c1, you'll have rook
free.
c1. So rook d2 is a threat.
No, but not immediately knight c1. Rook d2. Ah, you mean taking...
Rook d2 is
Rook
a
d2,
threat.
knight c1, rook takes c1 is
Yes.
winning.
Excuse me. Excuse
So there is a
me.
threat in the position, and I think that's why Magnus is starting to think,
Yeah.
saying, what have I done with my knight?
Yeah,
Why did I
how
put
is
it
he
on
getting
d3?
out of this?
Well,
I don't
maybe
know,
he
they could-
should go back with the rook and try and defend it. No, he's going rook.
Rook b1, and I think Maxime is quickly seizing the initiative there
Well,
because rook
he's-
d2 he played instantly.
He's
Rook
seen that.
b3.
Probably
He has to
because of
play
knight
rook b2.
e1.
So
And we
think
have a
that-
few moves, so let's just
Yes,
let
yes.
the odd update maybe.
It's not updated yet on our board. Now
And
it's
then
coming.
knight e5. This knight still hasn't gotten out. This knight on e5 now attacking the rook on d7, the pawn on f7. Some checkmating ideas also against the king on h7 now that he's completely abandoned. Even rook h8 being a
Yeah,
threat.
rook h8 would be strong. Rook
Ooh,
d1,
and
but
look at
this is
the
now
time
getting
difference now.
very tricky for Magnus Carlsen. Perhaps.
Tricky or even just lost because f5 is going to be in the works
king
soon.
d4,
What about... Yeah, the king can go up, actually. Yeah.
h4 now.
So Magnus...
Magnus is in a lot of
be.
trouble here.
Yeah.
King e5 or h4.
H4?
And h5 was a threat, so king g6 had to be played. Knight e5 check.
I'm actually wondering if there was a more precise move than h4, trying to keep the king caged in,
It should
perhaps
be good
g4.
enough.
Should be good, but this king on h5, yeah, now you can see. I like this rook g8 move, trying to close the cage around.
The problem is there is no
Black king,
actual
but it's not-
counterplay
So king
here.
c5 or king e3 as well.
King
e3 is
and-
fine.
That's the problem. This knight on b2 is just not
Look
helping.
at the time.
He can just
Down
take
to
on
10
g7.
seconds. Down to 10 seconds, the
So he
world
has
champion.
an idea of knight f3 and g4 mate.
That is quite an idea. That's
And-
why he goes to e2 and not to d2. I'm not really
So
sure
knight
why.
f3 against rook e3.
But what is defending this knight?
Knight.
There is stalemate. There is stalemate ideas.
Oh,
Ooh.
that's tricky.
But now he just
now
takes the
there's
knight
no
down.
stalemate.
He's seen that, Maxime. Maxime has solved like 80% of all studies.
This is
existing in
completely
chess, so
lost for Magnus.
He knows those things inside out, and Magnus is lost.
Okay, then.
And
Oh
that's
my
it.
God.
That's an important win for
That
Maxime.
is it.
Yes.
Oh,
you can
and did
see.
you see that? Did you
You
see
can
the
see.
frustration? Magnus is so angry with
He's
the way
so
things-
angry because it was really safe. I mean, this position was really safe. Perhaps he could even hope to be slightly better, and he ends up with this beautiful knight on d3,
Yes.
without a square.
Like Karyakin's
Capture.
bishop on c6.
What a tricky move this one. Knight d1 near the end.
But
just
this is
saying,
beautiful.
I'm going to give you a free knight. King takes d1. He's taking advantage of the fact that you're actually stalemated in some variation. The computer's saying, well, that was pretty, but it actually doesn't even work.
Yeah, probably. But
Unfortunately, after rook c1, king e2, I start running away, and the way that I run away is in a way that I move my knight so that I give you a move with your pawn. So there's actually no stalemate. It's still very pretty. An important win for Maxime, all stemming really from this move, knight d3, putting the knight in such an awkward position